No woman, no man, no child ever was deeply intimate with my father. The closest anyone ever came to casual camaraderie with the Padishah Emperor was the relationship offered by Count Casimir Fenring, a companion from childhood. The measure of Count Fenring's friendship may be seen first in a positive thing. He allayed Valanzrad's suspicions after the Arrakis affair. It cost more than 1 billion Solaris in space spice bribes, so my mother said, and there were other gifts as well. Slave women, royal honours, and tokens of rank. The second major evidence of the Count's friendship was negative. He refused to kill a man even though it was within his capabilities and my father commanded it. I will relate this personally. Count Fenring, a profile by the Princess Irulan. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen raged down the corridor from his private apartments, flitting through patches of late afternoon sunlight that poured down from high windows. He bobbed and twisted in his suspensors with violent movements. Past the private kitchen he stormed, past the library, past the small reception room and into the servants' antechamber, where the evening relaxation had already set in. The guard captain, Ayakin Nefud, squatted on a divan across the chamber, the stupor of Semuta dullness in his flat face, the eerie wailing of Semuta music around him. His own court sat near to do his bidding. Nefud, the Baron roared. Men scrambled. Nefud stood, his face composed by the narcotic but with an overlay of paleness that told of his fear. The Semuta music had stopped. My Lord Baron, Nefud said. Only the drug kept the trembling out of his voice. The Baron scanned the faces around him, seeing the looks of frantic quiet in them. He returned his attention to Nefud and spoke in a silken tone. How long have you been my guard, Captain Nefud? Nefud swallowed. Since Arrakis, my lord. Almost 2 years. And have you always anticipated dangers to my person? Such has been my only desire, my lord. Then where is Feyd-Rautha? The Baron roared. Nefud recoiled. My lord, you do not consider Feyd-Rautha a danger to my person? Again, the voice was silken. Nefud wet his lips with his tongue. Some of the Semuta dullness left his eyes. Feyd-Rautha's in the slave quarters, my lord. With the women again, eh? The Baron trembled with the effort of suppressing anger. Sire, could be he's... Silence! The Baron advanced another step into the antechamber, noting how the men moved back, clearing a subtle space around Nefud, disassociating themselves from the object of wrath. Did I not command you to know precisely where the Baron was at all times? The Baron asked. He moved a step closer. Did I not say to you that you were to know precisely what the Baron was saying at all times, and to whom? Another step. Did I not say to you that you were to tell me whenever he went into the quarters of the slave women? Nefud swallowed. Perspiration stood out on his forehead. The Baron held his voice flat, almost devoid of emphasis. Did I not say these things to you? Nefud nodded. And did I not say to you that you were to check all slave boys sent to me, and that you were to do this yourself, personally? Again, Nefud nodded. Did you, perchance, not see the blemish on the thigh of the one sent me this evening? The Baron asked. Is it possible you... Uncle? The Baron whirled, stared at Feyd-Rautha standing in the doorway. The presence of his nephew here, now, the look of hurry that the young man could not quite conceal, all revealed much. Feyd-Rautha had his own spy system focused on the Baron. There was a body in my chambers that I wish removed, the Baron said, and he kept his hand at the projectile weapon beneath his robes, thankful that his shield was the best. Feyd-Rautha glanced at the 2 guardsmen against the right wall, nodded. The 2 detached themselves, scurried out the door and down the hall toward the Baron's apartments. Those 2, eh? The Baron thought. Ah, this young monster has much to learn yet about conspiracy. I presume you left matters peaceful in the slave quarters, Feyd? The Baron said. I've been playing Cheops with the slave master, Feyd-Rautha said, and he thought, what has gone wrong? The boy we sent to my uncle has obviously been killed, but he was perfect for the job. Even Howard couldn't have made a better choice. The boy was perfect. Playing pyramid chess, the Baron said. How nice. Did you win? Yes, uncle. And Feyd-Rautha strove to contain his disquiet. The Baron snapped his fingers. Nefud, you wish to be restored to my good graces? Sire, what have I done? Nefud quavered. That's unimportant now, the Baron said. Feyd has beaten the slave master at Cheops. Did you hear that? Yes. Sire, I wish you to take 3 men and go to the slave master, the Baron said. Garrett, the slave master. Bring his body to me when you've finished, that I may see it was done properly. We cannot have such inept chess players in our employ. Feyd-Rautha went pale, took a step forward. But uncle, later, Feyd, the Baron said, and waved a hand. Later. The two guards who had gone to the Baron's quarters for the slave boy's body staggered past the antechamber door with their load sagging between them, arms trailing. The Baron watched until they were out of sight. Nefud stepped up beside the Baron. "You wish me to kill the slave master now, my lord?" "Now," the Baron said, "and when you've finished, add those two who just passed to your list. I don't like the way they carried that body. One should do such things neatly. I'll wish to see their carcasses too." Nefud said, "My lord, is it anything that I've do as your master has ordered?" Feyd-Rautha said, and he thought, "All I can hope for now is to save my own skin." "Good," the Baron thought, "he yet knows how to cut his losses." And the Baron smiled inwardly at himself, thinking, "The lad knows too what will please me and be most apt to stay my wrath from falling on him. He knows I must preserve him. Who else do I have who could take the reins I must leave some day? I have no other as capable. But he must learn, and I must preserve myself while he's learning." Nefud signalled men to assist him, led them out the door. "Will you accompany me to my chambers, Feyd?" the Baron asked. "I am yours to command," Feyd-Rautha said. He bowed, thinking, "I'm caught." "After you," the Baron said, and he gestured to the door. Feyd-Rautha indicated his fear by only the barest hesitation. "Have I failed utterly?" he asked himself. "Will he slip a poisoned blade into my back, slowly, through the shield? Does he have an alternative successor?" "Let him experience this moment of terror," the Baron thought as he walked along behind his nephew. "He will succeed me, but at a time of my choosing. I'll not have him throwing away what I've built." Feyd-Rautha tried not to walk too swiftly. He felt the skin crawling on his back as though his body itself wondered when the blow would come. His muscles alternately tensed and relaxed. "Have you heard the latest word from Arrakis?" the Baron asked. "No, uncle." Feyd-Rautha forced himself not to look back. He turned down the hall out of the servants' wing. "They have a new prophet or religious leader of some kind among the Fremen," the Baron said. "They call him Muad'Dib. Very funny, really. It means the mouse. I've told Rabban to let them have their religion. It'll keep them occupied." "That's very interesting, uncle," Feyd-Rautha said. He turned into the private corridor to his uncle's quarters, wondering, why does he talk about religion? Is it some subtle hint to me? "Yes, isn't it?" the Baron said. They came into the Baron's apartments through the reception salon to the bedchamber. Subtle signs of a struggle greeted them there. A dispenser lamp displaced, a bed cushion on the floor, a suva reel spilled open across a bedstand. "It was a clever plan," the Baron said. He kept his body shield turned to maximum, stopped, facing his nephew. "But not clever enough. Tell me, Feyd, why didn't you strike me down yourself? You've had opportunity enough." Feyd-Rautha found a dispenser chair, accomplished a mental shrug as he sat down in it, without being asked. "I must be bold now," he thought. "He taught me that my own hands must remain clean," he said. "Ah, yes," the Baron said. "When you face the Emperor, you must be able to say truthfully that you did not do the deed. The witch at the Emperor's elbow will hear your words and know their truth or falsehood. Yes, I warned you about that." "Why haven't you ever bought a Bene Gesserit, uncle?" Feyd-Rautha asked. "With a truth-sayer at your side, you know my tastes," the Baron snapped. Feyd-Rautha studied his uncle, said, "Still, one would be valuable for—" "I trust them not," the Baron snarled, and stopped trying to change the subject. Feyd-Rautha spoke mildly. "As you wish, uncle. I remember a time in the arena several years ago," the Baron said. "It seemed there that day a slave had been sent to kill you. Is that truly how it was?" "It's been so long ago, uncle." "After all, no evasions, please," the Baron said, and the tightness of his voice exposed the rein on his anger. Feyd-Rautha looked at his uncle, thinking, "He knows, else he wouldn't ask." "It was a sham, uncle. I arranged it to discredit your slave master." "Very clever," the Baron said. "Brave, too. That slave gladiator almost took you, didn't he?" "Yes. If you had finesse and subtlety to match such courage, you'd be truly formidable." The Baron shook his head from side to side, and as he had done many times since that terrible day on Arrakis, he found himself regretting the loss of Paita, the Mentat. There had been a man of delicate, devilish subtlety. It hadn't saved him, though. Again, the Baron shook his head. Fate was sometimes inscrutable. Feyd-Rautha glanced around the bedchamber, studying the signs of the struggle, wondering how his uncle had overcome the slave they prepared so carefully. "How did I best him?" the Baron asked. "Ah, now, Feyd, let me keep some weapons to preserve in my old age. It's better we use this time to strike a bargain." Feyd-Rautha stared at him. "A bargain? He means to keep me as his heir for certain, then. Else why bargain? One bargains with equals or near equals." "What bargain, uncle?" And Feyd-Rautha felt proud that his voice remained calm and reasonable, betraying none of the elation that filled him. The Baron, too, noted the control. He noted, "You're good material, Feyd. I don't waste good material. You persist, however, in refusing to learn my true value to you. You are obstinate. You do not see why I should be preserved as someone of the utmost value to you." This, He gestured at the evidence of the struggle in the bedchamber. This was foolishness. I do not reward foolishness. Get to the point, you old fool, Fedrafa thought. You think of me as an old fool, the Baron said. I must dissuade you of that. You speak of a bargain. Ah, the impatience of youth, the Baron said. Well, this is the substance of it, then. You will cease these foolish attempts on my life, and I, when you are ready for it, will step aside in your favour. I will retire to an advisory position, leaving you in the seat of power. Retire, uncle? You still think me the fool, the Baron said. And this but confirms it, eh? You think I'm begging you? Step cautiously, Fade. This old fool saw through the shielded needle you'd planted in that slave boy's thigh. Right where I'd put my hand on it, eh? The smallest pressure and snick. A poisoned needle in the old fool's palm. Ah, Fade. The Baron shook his head, thinking, it would have worked too if Howard hadn't warned me. Well, let the lad believe I saw the plot on my own. In a way I did. I was the one who saved Howard from the wreckage of Arrakis, and this lad needs greater respect for my prowess. Fedrafa remained silent, struggling with himself. Is he being truthful? Does he really mean to retire? Why not? I'm sure to succeed him one day if I move carefully. He can't live forever. Perhaps it was foolish to try hurrying the process. You speak of a bargain, Fedrafa said. What pledge do we give to bind it? How can we trust each other, eh? The Baron asked. Well, Fade, as for you, I'm setting Fuva Howard to watch over you. I trust Howard's mentat capabilities in this. Do you understand me? And as for me, you'll have to take me on faith. But I can't live forever, can I, Fade? And perhaps you should begin to suspect now that there are things I know which you should know. I give you my pledge, and what do you give me? Fedrafa asked. I let you go on living, the Baron said. Again Fedrafa studied his uncle. He sets Howard over me. What would he say if I told him how I planned the trick with the gladiator that cost him his slave master? He'd likely say I was lying in the attempt to discredit Howard. No, the good Fufa is a mentat and has anticipated this moment. Well, what do you say? The Baron asked. What can I say? I accept, of course. And Fedrafa thought, Howard, he plays both ends against the middle. Is that it? Has he moved to my uncle's camp because I didn't counsel with him over the slave boy attempt? You haven't said anything about my setting Howard to watch you, the Baron said. Fedrafa betrayed anger by a flaring of nostrils. The name of Howard had been a danger signal in the Harkonnen family for so many years, and now it had a new meaning. Still dangerous. Howard's a dangerous toy, Fedrafa said. Toy. Don't be stupid. I know what I have in Howard and how to control it. Howard has deep emotions, Fade. The man without emotions is the one to fear. But deep emotions, now, those can be bent to your needs. Uncle, I don't understand you. Yes, that's plain enough. Only a flicker of eyelids betrayed the passage of resentment through Fedrafa. And you do not understand Howard, the Baron said. Nor do you, Fedrafa thought. Who does Howard blame for his present circumstances? The Baron asked. Me? Certainly. But he was an Atreides tool and bested me for years until the Imperium took a hand. That's how he sees it. His hate for me is a casual thing now. He believes he can best me any time. Believing this, he is bested, for I direct his attention where I want it, against the Imperium. Tensions of a new understanding drew tight lines against Fedrafa's forehead, thinned his mouth. Against the Emperor? Let my dear nephew try the taste of that, the Baron thought. Let him say to himself, the Emperor Fedrafa Harkonnen. Let him ask himself how much that's worth. Surely it must be worth the life of one old uncle who could make that dream come to pass. Slowly Fedrafa wet his lips with his tongue. Could it be true what the old fool was saying? There was more here than there seemed to be. And what has Howard to do with this? Fedrafa asked. He thinks he uses us to wreak his revenge upon the Emperor. And when that's accomplished, he does not think beyond revenge. Howard's a man who must serve others, and doesn't even know this about himself. I've learned much from Howard, Fedrafa agreed, and felt the truth of the words as he spoke them. But the more I learn, the more I feel we should dispose of him. And soon. You don't like the idea of his watching you? Howard watches everybody, and he may put you on a throne. Howard is subtle. He is dangerous, devious, but I'll not yet withhold the antidote from him. A sword is dangerous too, Fade. We have the scabbard for this one, though. The poison's in him. When we withdraw the antidote, death will sheathe him. In a way, it's like the arena, Fedrafa said. Feints within feints. You watch to see which way the gladiator learns, which way he looks, how he holds his knife. He nodded to himself, seeing that these words pleased his uncle, but thinking, yes, like the arena, and the cutting edge is the mind. Now you see how you need me, the Baron said. I'm yet of use, Fade. A sword to be wielded until he's too blunt for use, Fedrafa thought. Yes, uncle, he said. And now, the Baron said, we'll go down to the slave quarters, we two. Now I'll watch while you with your own hands kill all the women in the pleasure wing. Uncle, There will be other women, Fade, but I have said that you do not make a mistake casually with me. Feyd-Rautha's face darkened. Uncle, you will accept your punishment and learn something from it, the Baron said. Feyd-Rautha met the gloating stare in his uncle's eyes. And I must remember this night, he thought, and remembering it, I must remember other nights. You will not refuse, the Baron said. What could you do if I refused, old man? Feyd-Rautha asked himself, but he knew there might be some other punishment, perhaps a more subtle one, a more brutal lever to bend him. I know you, Feyd, the Baron said. You will not refuse. All right, Feyd-Rautha thought. I need you now. I see that. The bargain's made. But I'll not always need you. And someday. Deep in the human unconscious is a pervasive need for a logical universe that makes sense, but the real universe is always one step beyond logic. From the sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. I've sat across from many rulers of great houses, but never seen a more gross and dangerous pig than this one, for Hawat told himself. You may speak plainly with me, Hawat. The Baron rumbled. He leaned back in his suspensor chair, the eyes in their folds of fat boring into Hawat. The old mentat looked down at the table between him and the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, noting the opulence of its grain. Even this was a factor to consider in assessing the Baron, as were the red walls of this private conference room and the faint sweet herb scent that hung on the air, masking a deeper musk. You didn't have me send that warning to Raban as an idle whim, the Baron said. Howard's leathery old face remained impressive, betraying none of the loathing he felt. I suspect many things, my lord, he said. Yes. Well, I wish to know how Arrakis figures in your suspicions about Salusa Secundus. It is not enough that you say to me the Emperor is in a ferment about some association between Arrakis and his mysterious prison planet. Now, I rushed the warning out to Raban only because the courier had to leave on that highliner. You said there could be no delay. Well and good, but now I will have an explanation. He babbles too much, Hawat thought. He's not like Leto, who could tell me a thing of the lift of an eyebrow or the wave of a hand, nor like the old Duke who could express an entire sentence in the way he accented a single word. This is a clod. Destroying him will be a service to mankind. You will not leave here until I've had a full and complete explanation, the Baron said. You speak too casually of Salusa Secundus, Hawat said. It's a penal colony, the Baron said. The worst riffraff in the galaxy is sent to Salusa Secundus. What else do we need to know? That conditions on the prison planet are more oppressive than anywhere else, Hawat said. You hear that the mortality rate among new prisoners is higher than 60%. You hear all this and do not ask questions? The Emperor doesn't permit the great houses to inspect his prison, the Baron growled, but he hasn't seen into my dungeons either. And curiosity about Salusa Secundus is, Hawat put a bony finger to his lips, discouraged, so he's not proud of some of the things he must do there. Hawat allowed the faintest of smiles to touch his dark lips. His eyes glinted in the glow-tube light as he stared at the Baron. And you've never wondered where the Emperor gets his Sardaukar? The Baron pursed his fat lips. This gave his features the look of a pouting baby, and his voice carried a tone of petulance as he said, Why, he recruits, that is to say, there are the levies and he enlists from far, Hawat snapped. The stories you hear about the exploits of the Sardaukar, they're not rumours, are they? Those are first-hand accounts from the limited number of survivors who fought against the Sardaukar, eh? Sardaukar are excellent fighting men, no doubt of it, the Baron said, but I think my own legions, a pack of holiday excursionists by comparison, Hawat snarled. You think I don't know why the Emperor turned against House Atreides? This is not a realm open to your speculation, the Baron warned. Is it possible that even he doesn't know what motivated the Emperor in this? Hawat asked himself. Any area is open to my speculation, if it does what you've hired me to do, Hawat said. I am a mentat. You do not withhold information or computation lines from a mentat. For a long minute, the Baron stared at him. Then, say what you must say, mentat. The Badashah Emperor turned against House Atreides, because the Dukes, War Masters, Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho trained a fighting force, a small fighting force, to within a hair as good as the Sardaukar. Some of them were even better, and the Duke was in a position to enlarge his force to make it every bit as strong as the Emperor's. The Baron waved this disclosure, then. What has Arrakis to do with this? It provides a pool of recruits already conditioned to the bitterest survival training. The Baron shook his head. You cannot mean Fremen. I mean the Fremen. Ha! Then why warn Raban? There cannot be more than a handful of Fremen left after the Sardaukar pogrom and Raban's oppression. Hawat continued to stare at him silently. Not more than a handful, the Baron repeated. Raban killed 6,000 of them last year alone. Still, Hawat stared at him. And the year before it was 9,000. the Baron said. Before they left, the Sardaukar must have accounted for at least 20,000. What are Raban's troop losses for the past 2 years? Howard asked. The Baron rubbed his jowls. Well, he has been recruiting rather heavily, to be sure. His agents make rather extravagant promises, and shall we say 30,000 in round numbers? Howard asked. That would seem a little high, the Baron said. Quite the contrary, Howard said. I can read between the lines of Raban's reports as well as you can, and you certainly must have understood my reports from our agents. Arrakis is a fierce planet, the Baron said. Storm losses can... We both know the figure for storm accretion, Howard said. What if he has lost 30,000? The Baron demanded, and blood darkened his face. By your own count, Howard said, he killed 15,000 over 2 years while losing twice that number. You say the Sardaukar accounted for another 20,000, possibly a few more. I've seen the transportation manifests for their return from Arrakis. If they killed 20,000, they lost almost 5 for 1. Why don't you face these figures, Baron, and understand what they mean? The Baron spoke in a coldly measured cadence. This is your job, Mentat. What do they mean? I gave you Duncan Idaho's head count on the siege he visited, Howard said. It all fits. If they had just 250 such siege communities, their population would be about 5 million. My best estimate is that they had at least twice that many communities. You scatter your population on such a planet. 10 million? The Baron's jowls quivered with amazement. At least. The Baron pursed his fat lips. The beady eyes stared without wavering at Howard. Is this true Mentat computation? He wondered. How could this be and no one suspect? We haven't even cut heavily into their birth rate growth figure, Howard said. We've just weeded out some of their less successful specimens, leaving the strong to grow stronger, just like on Salusa Secundus. Salusa Secundus, the Baron barked. What has this to do with the Emperor's prison planet? A man who survives Salusa Secundus starts out being tougher than most others, Howard said, when you add the very best military training. Nonsense! By your argument, I could recruit from among the Fremen after the way they've been oppressed by my nephew. Howard spoke in a mild voice. Don't you oppress any of your troops? Well, aye. But oppression is a relative thing, Howard said. Your fighting men are much better off than those around them, eh? They see unpleasant alternative to being soldiers of the Baron, eh? The Baron fell silent, eyes unfocused. The possibilities. Had Raban unwittingly given House Harkonnen its ultimate weapon? Presently he said, How could you be sure of the loyalty of such recruits? I would take them in small groups, not larger than platoon strength, Howard said. I'd remove them from their oppressive situation and isolate them with a training cadre of people who understood their background, preferably people who had preceded them from the same oppressive situation. Then I'd fill them with the mystique that their planet had really been a secret training ground to produce just such superior beings as themselves, and all the while I'd show them what such superior beings could earn: rich living, beautiful women, fine mansions, whatever they desired. The Baron began to nod, the way the Sardaukar live at home. The recruits come to believe in time that such a place as Salusa Secundus is justified because it produced them, the elite. The commonest Sardaukar trooper lives a life in many respects as exalted as that of any member of a great house. Such an idea, the Baron whispered. You begin to share my suspicions, Howard said. Where did such a thing start? The Baron asked. Ah, yes. Where did House Coroner originate? Were there people in Salusa Secundus before the Emperor sent his first contingent of prisoners there? Even the Duke Leto, a cousin on the distaff side, never knew for sure. Such questions were not encouraged. The Baron's eyes glazed with thought. Yes, a very carefully kept secret. They'd use every device of... Besides, what's there to conceal? Howard asked. That the Padishah Emperor has a prison planet? Everyone knows this. That he has... Count Fenring, the Baron blurted. Howard broke off, studied the Baron with a puzzled frown. What of Count Fenring? On my nephew's birthday several years ago, the Baron said, this imperial popinjay, Count Fenring, came as official observer and to, conclude a business arrangement between the Emperor and myself. So, during one of our conversations, I believe I said something about making a prison planet of Arrakis. Fenring, what did you say exactly? Howard asked. Exactly? That was quite a while ago, and my Lord Baron, if you wish to make the best use of my services, you must give me adequate information. Wasn't this conversation recorded? The Baron's face darkened to anger. You're as bad as Piter. I don't like these. Piter is no longer with you, my lord, Howard said. As to that, whatever did happen to Piter, he became too familiar, too demanding of me, the Baron said. You assure me you don't waste a useful man, Howard said. Will you waste me by threats and quibbling? We were discussing what you said to Count Fenring. Slowly the Baron composed his features. When the time comes, he thought, I'll remember his manner with me. Yes, I will remember. One moment, the Baron said, and he thought back to the meeting in his great hall. It helped to visualize the cone of silence in which they had stood. I said something like this, the Baron said. The Emperor knows a certain amount of killing has always been an arm of business. I was referring to our workforce losses. Then I said something about considering another solution to the Arakian problem, and I said the Emperor's prison planet inspired me to emulate him. Witchblood, Howard snapped. What did Fenwing say? That's when he began questioning me about you. Howard sat back, closed his eyes and thought. So that's why they started looking into Arrakis, he said. Well, the thing's done. He opened his eyes. They must have spies all over Arrakis by now. 2 years. That's certainly my innocent suggestion that nothing is innocent in an Emperor's eyes. What were your instructions to Raban? Merely that he should teach Arrakis to fear us. Howard shook his head. You now have 2 alternatives, Baron. You can kill off the natives, wipe them out entirely, or waste an entire workforce. Would you prefer to have the Emperor and those great houses he can still swing behind him, come in here and perform a cut retirement, scrape out Gady Prime like a hollow god? The Baron studied his mentat then. He wouldn't dare, wouldn't he? The Baron's lips quivered. What is your alternative? Abandon your dear nephew, Raban. The Baron broke off, stared at Howard. Send him no more troops, no aid of any kind. Don't answer his messages other than to say you've heard of the terrible way he's handled things in Arrakis. You intend to take corrective measures as soon as you're able. I'll arrange to have some of your messages intercepted by Imperial spies. But what of the spies, the revenues, the demand your baronial profits, but be careful how you make your demands. Require fixed sums of Raban. We can... The Baron turned his hands palms up. But how can I be certain that my weasel nephew isn't? We still have our spies in Arrakis. Tell Raban he either meets the spies quotas you set him, or he'll be replaced. I know my nephew, the Baron said. This would only make him oppress the population even more. Of course he will, Howard snapped. You don't want that stopped now. You merely want your own hands clean. Let Raban make your Seleucus secondus for you. There's no need even to send him any prisoners. He has all the population required. If Raban is driving his people to beat your spice quotas, then the Emperor need suspect no other motive. That's reason enough for putting the planet on the rack. And you, Baron, will not show by word or action that there's any other reason for this. The Baron could not keep the sly tone of admiration out of his voice. Ah, Howard, you are a devious one. Now how do we move into Arrakis and make use of what Raban prepares? That's the simplest thing of all, Baron. If you set each year's quota a bit higher than the one before, matters will soon reach a head there. Production will drop off. You can remove Raban and take over yourself to correct the mess. It fits, the Baron said, but I can feel myself tiring of all this. I'm preparing another to take over Arrakis for me. Howard studied the fat face across from him. Slowly the old soldier spy began to nod his head. Fred Ralpha, he said. So that's the reason for the oppression now. You're very devious yourself, Baron. Perhaps we can incorporate these 2 schemes. Yes, your Fred Ralpha can go to Arrakis as their saviour. He can win the populace. Yes. The Baron smiled, and behind his smile he asked himself, now, how does this fit into Howard's personal scheming? And Howard, seeing that he was dismissed, arose and left the red-walled room. As he walked, he could not put down the disturbing unknowns that cropped into every computation about Arrakis. This new religious leader that Gurney Halleck hinted at from his hiding place among the smugglers, this Muad'Dib. Perhaps I should not have told the Baron to let this religion flourish where it will, even among the folk of Pan and Graven, he told himself. But it's well known that repression makes your religion flourish. And he thought about Halleck's reports on Fremen battle tactics. The tactics smacked of Halleck himself, and Idaho, and even of Howard. Did Idaho survive? He asked himself. But this was a futile question. He did not yet ask himself if it was possible that Paul had survived. He knew the Baron was convinced that all the Atreides were dead. The Bene Gesserit witch had been his weapon, the Baron admitted, and that could only mean an end to all, even to the woman's own son. What a poisonous hate she must have had for the Atreides, he thought, something like the hate I hold for this Baron. Will my blow be as final and complete as hers? There is in all things a pattern that is part of our universe. It is symmetry, elegance, and grace, those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons, in the way sand trails along a ridge, in the branch clusters of the creosote bush, or the pattern of its leaves. We try to copy these patterns in our lives and our society, seeking the rhythms, the dances, the forms that comfort. Yet it is possible to see peril in the finding of ultimate perfection. It is clear that the ultimate pattern contains its own fixity. In such perfection, all things move toward death. From the collected sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Poor Muad'Dib remembered that there had been a meal heavy with spice essence. He clung to this memory because it was an anchor point, and he could tell himself from this vantage that his immediate experience must be a dream. I am a feeder of processes, he told himself. I am a prey to the imperfect vision, to the race consciousness and its terrible purpose. Yet he could not escape the fear that he had somehow overrun himself, lost his position in time, as if our past and future and present mingled without distinction. It was a kind of visual fatigue, and it came, he knew, from the constant necessity of holding the prescient future as a kind of memory that was in itself a thing intrinsically of the past. Chani prepared the meal for me, he told himself, yet Chani was deep in the south, in the cold country where the sun was hot, secreted in one of the new siege strongholds, safe of their son, Leto II. Or was that a thing yet to happen? No, he reassured himself, for Alia the Strange One, his sister, had gone there with his mother and with Chani, a 20-thumper trip into the south, riding a reverend mother's palanquin fixed to the back of a wild maker. He shied away from thought of riding the giant worms, asking himself, or is Alia yet to be born? I was on Razia, Paul recalled. We went raiding to recover the water of our dead in Arakeen, and I found the remains of my father in the funeral pyre. I enshrined the skull of my father in a Fremen rock overlooking Haag Pass. Or was that a thing yet to be? My wounds are real, Paul told himself. My scars are real. The shrine of my father's skull is real. Still in the dreamlike state, Paul remembered that Hara, Jamis' wife, had intruded on him once to say there'd been a fight in the siege corridor, that had been the interim siege before the women and children had been sent into the deep south. Hara had stood there in the entrance to the inner chamber, the black rings of her hair tied back by water rings on a chain. She had held aside the chamber's hangings and told him that Chani had just killed someone. This happened, Paul told himself. This was real, not born out of its time and subject to change. Paul remembered he had rushed out to find Chani standing beneath the yellow globes of the corridor, clad in a brilliant blue wraparound robe with hood thrown back, a flush of exertion on her elfin features. She had been sheathing her Christ knife. A huddled group had been hurrying away down the corridor with a burden, and Paul remembered telling himself, you always know when they're carrying a body. Chani's water rings, worn openly in siege on a cord around her neck, tinkled as she turned toward him. Chani, what is this? He asked. I dispatched one who came to challenge you in single combat, Yusul. You killed him? Yes, but perhaps I should have left him for Hara. And Paul recalled how the faces of the people around them had showed appreciation for these words. Even Hara had laughed. But he came to challenge me. You trained me yourself in the weirding way, Yusul. Certainly, but you shouldn't. I was born in the desert, Yusul. I know how to use the Christ knife. He suppressed his anger, tried to talk reasonably. This may all be true, Chani, but I am no longer a child hunting scorpions in the siege by the light of a hand globe, Yusul. I do not play games. Paul glared at her, caught by the odd ferocity beneath her casual attitude. He was not worthy, Yusul, Chani said. I'd not disturb your meditations with the likes of him. She moved closer, looking at him out of the corners of her eyes, dropping a voice so that only he might hear. And, beloved, when it's learned that a challenger may face me and be brought to shameful death by Muad'Dib's women, there'll be fewer challengers. Yes, Paul told himself, that had certainly happened. It was true past, and the number of challengers testing the new blade of Muad'Dib did drop dramatically. Somewhere, in a world not of the dream, there was a hint of motion, the cry of a night bird. A dream, Paul reassured himself. It's the spice meal. Still, there was about him a feeling of abandonment. He wondered if it might be possible that his Russ spirit had slipped over somehow into the world where the Fremen believed he had his true existence, into the Alam al-Mifal, the world of similitudes, that metaphysical realm where all physical limitations were removed, and he knew fear at the thought of such a place, because removal of all limitations meant removal of all points of reference. In the landscape of a myth that could not orient himself and say, I am I because I am here. His mother had said once, the people are divided, some of them in how they think of you. I must be waking from the dream, Paul told himself, for this had happened, these words from his mother, the Lady Jessica, who was now a reverend mother of the Fremen. These words had passed through reality. Jessica was fearful of the religious relationship between himself and the Fremen, Paul knew. She didn't like the fact that people of both Siege and Graben referred to Muad'Dib as him, and she went questioning among the tribes, sending out her Sayadina spies, collecting their answers and brooding on them. She had quoted the Bene Gesserit proverb to him, when religion and politics travel in the same cart, the riders believe nothing can stand in their way. Their movement becomes headlong, faster and faster and faster. They put aside all thoughts of obstacles and forget that a precipice does not show itself to the man in a blind rush until it's too late. Paul recalled that he had sat there in his mother's quarters, in their inner chambers shrouded by dark hangings with their surfaces covered by woven patterns out of Fremen mythology. He had sat there, hearing her out, noting the way she was always observing, even when her eyes were lowered. Her oval face had new lines in it at the corners of the mouth, but the hair was still like polished bronze. The wide-set green eyes, though, hid beneath their overcasting of spice-imbued blue. The Fremen have a simple, practical religion, he said. Nothing about religion is simple, she warned. But Paul, seeing the clouded future that still hung over them, found himself swayed in anger. He could only say, religion unifies our forces. It's our mystique. You deliberately cultivate this bravura, she charged. You never cease indoctrinating. Thus you yourself taught me, he said. But she had been full of contentions and arguments that day. It had been the day of the circumcision ceremony for little Leto. Paul had understood some of the reasons for her upset. She had never accepted his liaison, the marriage of youth, with Chani, but Chani had produced an Atreides son, and Jessica had found herself unable to reject the child and the mother. Jessica had stirred finally under his stare, said, You think me an unnatural mother. Of course not. I see the way you watch me when I'm with your sister. You don't understand about your sister. I know why Alia is different, he said. She was unborn, part of you, when you changed the water of life. You know nothing of it. And Paul, suddenly unable to express for knowledge gained out of its time, said only, I don't think you are natural. She saw his distress, said, There is a thing, son. Yes, I do love your Chani. I accept her. This was real, Paul told himself. This wasn't the imperfect vision to be changed by the twistings out of time's own birth. The reassurance gave him a new hold on his world. Bits of solid reality began to dip through the dreamed state into his awareness. He knew suddenly that he was in a Heereg, a desert camp. Chani had planted their still tent on flower sand for its softness. That could only mean Chani was nearby. Chani, his soul. Chani, his Sihaya, sweet as the desert spring. Chani up from the palmaries of the deep south. Now he remembered her singing a sand chanty to him in the time for sleep. O my soul, have no taste for paradise this night, and I swear by Shai Hulud you will go there, obedient to my love. And she had sung the walking song lovers shared on the sand, its rhythm like the drag of the dunes against the feet. Tell me of thine eyes, and I will tell thee of thy heart. Tell me of thy feet, and I will tell thee of thy hands. Tell me of thy sleeping, and I will tell thee of thy waking. Tell me of thy desires, and I will tell thee of thy need. He had heard someone strumming a balisette in another tent, and he'd thought then of Gurney Halleck. Reminded by the familiar instrument, he had thought of Gurney, whose face he had seen in the smuggler band, but who had not seen him, could not see him or know of him, lest that inadvertently lead the Harkonnens to the son of the Duke they had killed. But the style of the player in the night, the distinctiveness of the fingers on the balisette strings, brought the real musician back to Paul's memory. It had been Chat Alipa, captain of the Fedaykin, leader of the Death Commandos who guarded Muad'Dib. We are in the desert, Paul remembered. We are in the central Urk beyond the Harkonnen patrols. I am here to walk the sand, to lure a maker and mount him by my own cunning, that I may be a Fremen entire. He felt now the Mauler pistol at his belt, the Cry's knife. He felt the silence surrounding him. It was that special pre-morning silence when the night birds had gone and the day creatures had not yet signalled their alertness to their enemy, the sun. You must ride the sand in the light of day, that Shai Hulud shall see, and know you have no fear, Stilgar had said. Thus we turn our time around and set ourselves to sleep this night. Quietly Paul sat up, feeling the looseness of a slacked still suit around his body, the shadowed still tent beyond. So softly he moved, yet Chani heard him. She spoke from the tent's gloom, another shadow there. It's not yet full light, beloved. Sihaya, he said, speaking with half a laugh in his voice. You call me your desert spring, she said, but this day I'm thy goad. I am the Sayadina who watches that the rites be obeyed. He began tightening his still suit. You told me once the words of the Kitab Ali-Bar, he said. You told me, Woman is thy field, go enter thy field and till it. I am the mother of thy firstborn, she agreed. He saw her in the greyness matching his movement, securing her still suit for the open door. You should go to all the rest you can, she said. He recognized her love for him speaking then and chided her gently. The Sayadina of the watch does not caution or warn the candidate. She slid across to his side, touched his cheek with her palm. Today I am both the watcher and the woman. You should have left this duty to another, he said. Waiting is bad enough at best, she said. I'd sooner be at thy side. He kissed her palm before securing the face flap of his suit, then turned and cracked the seal of the tent. The air that came into them held the chill, not quite dryness that would precipitate trace dew in the dawn. With it came the smell of a pre-spice mass, the mass they had detected off to the northeast, and that told them there would be a maker nearby. Paul crawled through the sphincter opening, stood on the sand, and stretched for sleep from his muscles. A faint green-pearl luminescence edged from the eastern horizon. The tents of his troop were small, false dunes around him in the gloom. He saw movement off to the left. The guard, and knew they had seen him. They knew the peril he faced this day. Each Fremen had faced it. They gave him these last few moments of isolation now that he might prepare himself. It must be done today, he told himself. He thought of the power he wielded in the face of the pogrom, the old men who sent their sons to him to be trained in the weeding way of battle, the old men who listened to him now in council and followed his plans, the men who returned to pay him that highest Fremen compliment. Your plan worked, Muad'Dib. Yet the meanest and smallest of the Fremen warriors could do a thing that he had never done, and Paul knew his leadership suffered from the omnipresent knowledge of this difference between them. He had not ridden the Maker. I had gone up with the others for training trips and raids, but he had not made his own voyage. Until he did, his world was bounded by the abilities of others. No true Fremen could permit this. Until he did this thing himself, even the great Southlands, the area some 20 thumpers beyond the Erg, were denied him unless he ordered a palanquin and rode like a reverend mother, or one of the sick and wounded. Memory returned to him of his wrestling with his inner awareness during the night. He saw a strange parallel here. If he mastered the Maker, his rule was strengthened. If he mastered the inward eye, this carried its own measure of command. But beyond them both lay the clouded area, the great unrest where all the universe seemed embroiled. The differences in the ways he comprehended the universe haunted him. Accuracy matched with inaccuracy. He saw it in situ. Yet when it was born, when it came into the pressures of reality, that now had its own life and grew with its own subtle differences. Terrible purpose remained, race consciousness remained, and over all loomed the jihad, bloody and wild. Shani joined him outside the tent, hugging her elbows, looking up at him from the corners of her eyes the way she did when she studied his mood. Tell me again about the waters of thy birth world, Usul, she said. He saw it as she was trying to distract him, ease his mind of tensions before the deadly test. It was growing lighter, and he noted that some of his Fedakin were already striking their tents. I'd rather you told me about the siege and about our son, he said. Does Leto yet hold my mother in his palm? It's Alia he holds as well, she said, and he goes rapidly. He'll be a big man. What's it like in the south? He asked. When you ride the Maker, you'll see for yourself, she said, but I wish to see it first through your eyes. It's powerfully lonely, she said. He touched the Nezhoni scarf at her forehead, where it protruded from her stillsuit cap. Why will you not talk about the siege? I have talked about it. The siege is a lonely place without our men. It's a place of work. We labour in the factories and the potting rooms. There are weapons to be made, poles to plant that we may forecast the weather, spice to collect for the bribes. There are dunes to be planted to make them grow, and to anchor them. There are fabrics and rugs to make, fuel cells to charge. There are children to train that the tribe's strength may never be lost. Is nothing then pleasant in the siege? He asked. The children are pleasant. We observe the rites. We have sufficient food. Sometimes one of us may come north to be with her man. Life must go on. My sister Alia, is she accepted by the people? Chani turned toward him in the growing dawnlight. Her eyes bored into him. It's a thing to be discussed another time, beloved. Let us discuss it now. You should conserve your energies for the test, she said. He saw Vidya had touched something sensitive, hearing the withdrawal in her voice. The unknown brings its own worries, he said. Presently she nodded, said, There is yet misunderstanding because of Alia's strangeness. The women are fearful because a child little more than an infant talks of things that only an adult should know. They do not understand the change in the womb that made Alia different. There is trouble? He asked, and he thought, I've seen visions of trouble over Alia. China looked through the growing line of the sunrise. Some of the women banded to appeal to the Reverend Mother. They demanded she exorcise the demon in her daughter. They quoted the scripture, Suffer not a witch to live among us. And what did my mother say to them? She recited the law and sent the women away abashed. She said, if Alia incites trouble, it is the fault of authority for not foreseeing and preventing the trouble. And she tried to explain how the change had worked on Alia in the womb, but the women were angry because they had been embarrassed. They went away muttering. There will be trouble because of Alia, he thought. A crystal blowing of sand touched the exposed portions of his face, bringing the scent of the pre-spice mass. El Sayal, the rain of sand that brings the morning, he said. He looked out across the grey light of the desert landscape, the landscape beyond pity, the sand that was form absorbed in itself. Dry lightning streaked in a dark corner to the south, sign that a storm had built up its static charge there. The roll of thunder boomed long after. The voice that beautifies the land, Chani said. More of his men were stirring out of their tents. Guards were coming in from the rims. Everything around him moved smoothly in the ancient routine that required no orders. Give as few orders as possible, his father had told him once, long ago. Once you've given orders on a subject, you must always give orders on that subject. The Fremen knew this rule instinctively. The troop's watermaster became the morning chanty, adding to it now the call for the right to initiate a sand rider. The world is a carcass, the man chanted, his voice wailing across the dunes. Who can turn away the angel of death? What Shai Halud has decreed must be. Paul listened, recognizing that these were the words that also became the death chant of the Fedaykin, the words the deaf commandos recited as they hurled themselves into battle. Will there be a rock shrine here this day to mark the passing of another soul? Paul asked himself. Will Fremen stop here in the future, each to add another stone and think on Muad'Dib who died in this place? He knew this was among the alternatives today, a fact along lines of the future radiating from this position in time-space. The imperfect vision plagued him. The more he resisted his terrible purpose and fought against the coming of the jihad, the greater the turmoil that wove through his prescience. His entire future was becoming like a river hurtling toward a chasm, the violent nexus beyond which is all fog and clouds. Which all was fog and clouds. Stilgar approaches, Chani said. I must stand apart now, beloved. Now I must be Sayadina and observe the rite that it may be reported truly in the chronicles. She looked up at him and, for a moment, her reserve slipped. Then she had herself under control. When this is past, I shall prepare thy breakfast with my own hands, she said. She turned away. Stilgar moved toward him across the flour sand, stirring up little dust puddles. The dark niches of his eyes remained steady on Paul with their untamed stare. The glimpse of black beard above the steel suit mask, the lines of craggy cheeks, could have been wind-etched from the native rock for all their movement. The man carried Paul's banner on its staff. The green and black banner with a water tube in the staff. That already was a legend in the land. Half pridefully, Paul thought, I cannot do the simplest thing without it becoming a legend. They will mark how I parted from Chani, how I greet Stilgar, every move I make this day. Live or die, it is a legend. I must not die. Then it will be the only legend and nothing to stop the jihad. Stilgar planted the staff in the sand beside Paul, dropped his hands to his sides. The blue of his blue eyes remained level and intent, and Paul thought how his own eyes already were assuming this mask of colour from the spice. They denied us the Hajj, Stilgar said with ritual solemnity. As Chani had taught him, Paul responded, Who can deny a Fremen the right to walk or ride where he wills? I am a Naib, Stilgar said, never to be taken alive. I am a leg of the death tripod that will destroy our foes. Silence settled over them. Paul glanced at the other Fremen scattered over the sand beyond Stilgar, the way they stood without moving for this moment of personal prayer, and he thought of how the Fremen were a people whose living consisted of killing, an entire people who had lived with rage and grief all of their days, never once considering what might take the place of either, except for a dream with which Liat Kynes had infused them before his death. Where is the Lord who led us through the land of desert and of pits? Stilgar asked. He is ever with us, the Fremen chanted. Stilgar squared his shoulders, stepped closer to Paul and lowered his voice. Now remember what I told you. Do it simply and directly, nothing fancy. Among our people we ride the Maker at the age of 12. You are more than 6 years beyond that age and not born to this life. You don't have to impress anyone with your courage. We know you are brave. All you must do is call the Maker and ride him. I will remember, Paul said. See that you do. I'll not have you shame my teaching. Stilgar pulled a plastic rod about a meter long from beneath his robe. The thing was pointed at one end, had a spring wound clapper at the other. I prepared this thumper myself. It's a good one. Take it. Paul felt the warm smoothness of the plastic as he accepted the thumper. Shishakli has your hooks, Stilgar said. He'll hand them to you as you step out onto that dune over there. He pointed to his right. Call a big maker, Yusul. Show us the way. Paul marked the tone of Stilgar's voice, half ritual and half that of a worried friend. In that instant, the sun seemed to bound above the horizon. The sky took on the silvered grey blue that warned this would be a day of extreme heat and dryness even for Arrakis. It is the time of the scalding day, Stilgar said, and now his voice was entirely ritual. Go, Yusul, and ride the Maker. Travel the sand as a leader of men. Paul saluted his banner, noting how the green and black flag hung limply now that the dawn wind had died. He turned toward the dune Stilgar had indicated, a dirty tan slope with an S-track crest. Already most of the troop was moving out in the opposite direction, climbing the other dune that had sheltered their camp. One robed figure remained in Paul's path. Shishakli, a squad leader of the Fedaykin, only his slope-lidded eyes visible between stillsuit cap and mask. Shishakli presented two thin whip-like staffs as Paul approached. The shafts were about 1.5 meters long with glistening glass steel hooks at one end, roughened at the other end for a firm grip. Paul accepted them both in his left hand as required by the ritual. They are my own hooks, Shishakli said in a husky voice. They never have failed. Paul nodded, maintaining the necessary silence, moved past the man and up the dune slope. At the crest he glanced back, saw the troop scattering like a flight of insects, their robes fluttering. He stood alone now on the sandy ridge with only the horizon in front of him, the flat and unmoving horizon. This was A good Dune Stilgar had chosen, higher than its companions for the viewpoint vantage. Stooping, Paul planted the thumper deep into the windward face, where the sand was compacted and would give maximum transmission to the drumming. Then he hesitated, reviewing the lessons, reviewing the life and death necessities that faced him. When he threw the latch, the thumper would begin its summons. Across the sand, a giant worm, a maker, would hear and come to the drumming. With the whip-like hook staffs, Paul knew he could mount the maker's high curving back. For as long as the forward edge of a worm's wing segment was held open by a hook, open to admit abrasive sand into the more sensitive interior, the creature would not retreat beneath the desert. It would, in fact, roll its gigantic body to bring the opened segment as far away from the desert surface as possible. "I am a sand rider," Paul told himself. He glanced down at the hooks in his left hand, thinking that he had only to shift those hooks down the curve of Maker's immense side to make the creature roll and turn, guiding it where he willed. He had seen it done. He had been helped up the side of a worm for a short ride in training. The captive worm could be ridden until it lay exhausted and quite cruisient upon the desert surface, and now new Maker must be summoned. Once he was past this test, Paul knew he was qualified to make the 20-thumper journey into the Southland, to rest and restore himself, into the south where the women and the families had been hidden from the pogrom among the new Palmaris and Sietch warrens. He lifted his head and looked to the south, reminding himself that the Maker summoned wilds from the Erg was an unknown quantity, and the one who summoned it was equally unknown to the test. "You must gauge the approaching Maker carefully," Stilgar had explained. "You must stand close enough that you can mount it as it passes, yet not so close that it engulfs you." With abrupt decision, Paul released the thumper's latch. The clapper began revolving and the summons drummed through the sand, a measured lump, lump, lump. He straightened, scanning the horizon, remembering Stilgar's words. "Judge the line of approach carefully. Remember, a worm seldom makes an unseen approach to a thumper. Listen all the same. You may often hear it before you see it." And Shani's words of caution, whispered at night when her fear for him overcame her, filled his mind. "When you take your stand along the Maker's path, you must remain utterly still. You must think like a patch of sand. Hide beneath your cloak and become a little Dune in your very essence." Slowly he scanned the horizon, listening, watching for the signs he had been taught. It came from the southeast, a distant hissing, a sand whisper. Presently he saw the faraway outline of the creature's track against the dawnlight, and realized he had never before seen a Maker this large, never heard of one this size. It appeared to be more than half a league long, and the rise of the sand wave at its cresting head was like the approach of a mountain. "This is nothing I have seen by vision or in life," Paul cautioned himself. He hurried across the path of the thing to take his stand, caught up entirely by the rushing needs of this moment. "Control the coinage and the courts, let the rabble have the rest. Thus the Padishah Emperor advises you. And he tells you, if you want profits, you must rule. There is truth in these words, but I ask myself, who are the rabble and who are the ruled?" Muad'Dib's secret message to the Landsraad, from Arrakis Awakening by the Princess Irulan. A thought came unbidden to Jessica's mind. Paul will be undergoing his Sandrider test at any moment now. They try to conceal this fact from me, but it's obvious. And Chani has gone on some mysterious errand. Jessica sat in her resting chamber, catching a moment of quiet between the night's classes. It was a pleasant chamber, but not as large as the one she had enjoyed in Sietch Tabor before their flight from the pogrom. Still, this place had thick rugs on the floor, soft cushions, a low coffee table near at hand, multicolored hangings on the wall, and soft yellow glow globes overhead. The room was permeated with a distinctive acrid, furry odor of the Fremen siege that she had come to associate with a sense of security. Yet she knew she would never overcome a feeling of being in an alien place. It was the harshness that the rugs and hangings attempted to conceal. A faint tinkling drumming slapping penetrated to the resting chamber. Jessica knew it for a birth celebration, probably Subie's. Her time was near. Jessica knew she'd see the baby soon enough, a blue-eyed cherub brought to the Reverend Mother for blessing. She knew also that her daughter, Alia, would be at the celebration and would report on it. It was not yet time for the nightly prayer of parting. They wouldn't have started the birth celebration near the time of ceremony that mourned the slave raids of Porotrin, Bela, Tegus, Rossack, and Harmonfeb. Jessica sighed. She knew she was trying to keep her thoughts off her son and the dangers he faced, the pit traps of their poisoned barbs, the Harkonnen raids, where these were growing fewer as the Fremen took their toll of aircraft and raiders with the new weapons Paul had given them, and the natural dangers of the desert, makers and thirst and dust chasms. She thought of calling for coffee, and with the thought came that ever-present awareness of paradox in the Fremen way of life, how well they lived in these siege caverns compared to the Graben Pions, yet how much more they endured in the open hazure of the desert, more than anything the Harkonnen bondsmen endured. A dark hand inserted itself through the hangings beside her, deposited a cup upon the table, and withdrew. From the cup arose the aroma of spiced coffee, an offering from the birth celebration, Jessica thought. She took the coffee and sipped it, smiling at herself. In what upper society of our universe, she asked herself, would a person of my station accept an anonymous drink and quaff that drink without fear? I could alter any poison now before it did me harm, of course, but the donor doesn't realize this. She drained the cup, feeling the energy and lift of its contents, hot and delicious. And she wondered what other society would have such a natural regard for her privacy and comfort that the giver would intrude only enough to deposit the gift and not inflict her with the donor. Respect and love had sent the gift, for only a slight tinge of fear. Another element of the incident forced itself into her awareness. She had thought of coffee and it had appeared. There was nothing of telepathy here, she knew. It was for Tao, the oneness of the siege community, a compensation from the subtle poison of the spice diet they shared. The great mass of the people could never hope to attain the enlightenment the spice seed brought to her. They had not been trained and prepared for it. Their minds rejected what they could not understand or encompass. Still they felt and reacted sometimes like a single organism, and the thought of coincidence never entered their minds. Has Paul passed his test on the sand? Jessica asked herself. He's capable, but accident can strike down even the most capable. The waiting. It's the dreariness, she thought. You can wait just so long, but then the dreariness of the waiting overcomes you. There was all manner of waiting in their lives. More than 2 years we've been here, she thought, and twice that number at least to go before we can even hope to think of trying to wrest Arrakis from the Harkonnen governor, the Mudir Naya, the Beast Rabban. Reverend Mother? The voice from outside the hangings at her door was that of Hara, the other woman in Paul's menage. Yes, Hara. The hangings parted and Hara seemed to glide through them. She wore siege sandals, a red-yellow wraparound that exposed her arms almost to the shoulders. Her black hair was parted in the middle and swept back like the wings of an insect, flat and oily against her head. The jutting, predatory features were drawn into an intense frown. Behind Hara came Alia, a girl child of about 2 years. Seeing her daughter, Jessica was caught, as she frequently was, by Alia's resemblance to Paul at that age, the same wide-eyed solemnity to her questing look, the dark hair and firmness of mouth. But there were subtle differences too, and it was in those that most adults found Alia disquieting. The child, little more than a toddler, carried herself with a calmness and awareness beyond her years. Adults were shocked to find her laughing at a subtle play of words between the sexes, or would catch themselves listening to her half-lisping voice, still blurred as it was by an unformed soft palate, and discover in her words sly remarks that could only be based on experiences no 2-year-old had ever encountered. Hara sank to a cushion with an exasperated sigh, frowned at the child. Alia, Jessica motioned to her daughter. The child crossed to a cushion beside her mother, sank to it and clasped her mother's hand. The contact of flesh restored the mutual awareness they had shared since before Alia's birth. It wasn't a matter of shared thoughts, although there were bursts of that if they touched while Jessica was changing the spice poison for a ceremony. It was something larger, an immediate awareness of another living spark, a sharp and poignant thing, a nerve simpatico that made them emotionally one. In the formal manner that befitted the number of her son's household, Jessica said, Shubak ul Kuha Hara, this night finds you well? With the same traditional formality, she said, Subak ul Na, I am well. The words were almost toneless. Again, she sighed. Jessica sensed amusement from Alia. My brother's Ganima is annoyed with me, Alia said in her half-lisp. Jessica marked the term Alia used to refer to Hara, Ganima. In the subtleties of the Fremen tongue, the word meant something acquired in battle, and with the added overtone that the something no longer was used for its original purpose, an ornament, a spearhead used as a curtain weight. Hara scowled at the child. Don't try to insult me, child. I know my place. What have you done this time, Alia? Jessica asked. Hara answered. Not only has she refused to play with the other children today, but she intruded where I hid behind the hangings and watched Subie's child being born, Alia said. It's a boy. He cried and cried. What a set of lungs. When he'd cried long enough, she came out and touched him, Hara said, and he stopped crying. Everyone knows the Fremen baby must get his crying done at birth if he's in siege, because he can never cry again lest he betray our son Hajar. He'd cried enough, Alia said. I just wanted to feel his spark, his life, that's all. And when he felt me, he didn't want to cry anymore. It's just made more talk among the people, Hara said. Subie's boy is healthy? Jessica asked. She saw that something was troubling Hara deeply and wondered at it. Healthy as any mother could ask, Hara said. They know Alia didn't hurt him. They didn't so much mind her touching him. He settled down right away and was happy. It was... Hara shrugged. It's the strangeness of my daughter, is that it? Jessica asked. It's the way she speaks of things beyond her years and of things no child her age could know. Things of the past. How could she know what a child looked like on Bela Tegu's? Hara demanded. But he does, Alia said. Sulbe's boy looks just like the son of Mifa born before the parting. Alia, Jessica said. I warned you. But mother, I saw it and it was true, and... Jessica shook her head, seeing the signs of disturbance in Hara's face. What have I borne? Jessica asked herself. A daughter who knew at birth everything that I knew, and more. Everything revealed to her out of the corridors of the past by the Reverend Mothers within me. It's not just the things she says, Hara said. It's the exercises too. The way she sits and stares at a rock, moving only one muscle beside her nose, or a muscle on the back of her finger, or... Those are the Bene Gesserit training, Jessica said. You know that, Hara. Would you deny my daughter her inheritance? Reverend Mother, you know these things don't matter to me, Hara said. It's the people in the way they mutter. I feel danger in it. They say your daughter's a demon, but other children refuse to play with her. That she has so little in common with the other children, Jessica said. She's no demon. It's just of course she's not. Jessica found herself surprised at the vehemence in Hara's tone, glanced down at Alia. The child appeared lost in thought, radiating a sense of waiting. Jessica returned her attention to Hara. I respect the fact that you're a member of my son's household, Jessica said. Alia stirred against her hand. You may speak openly with me of whatever's troubling you. I will not be a member of your son's household much longer, Hara said. I've waited this long for the sake of my sons, the special training they receive as the children of Usul. It's little enough I could give them, since it's known I don't share your son's bed. Again, Alia stood beside her, half sleeping, warm. You'd have made a good companion for my son, though, Jessica said, and she added to herself because such thoughts were ever with her, companion, not a wife. Jessica's thoughts went then straight to the centre, to the pang that came from the common talk in the siege that her son's companionship of Chani had become the permanent thing, the marriage. I love Chani, Jessica thought, but she reminded herself that love might have to step aside for royal necessity. Royal marriages had other reasons than love. You think I don't know what you plan for your son? Hara asked. What do you mean? Jessica demanded. You plan to unite the tribes under him, Hara said. Is that bad? I see danger for him, and Alia is part of that danger. Alia nestled closer to her mother, eyes opened now and studying Hara. I've watched you two together, Hara said, the way you touch, and Alia is like my own flesh because she's sister to one who is like my brother. I've watched over her and guarded her from the time she was a mere baby, from the time of the razzia when we fled here. I've seen many things about her. Jessica nodded, feeling disquiet begin to grow in Alia beside her. You know what I mean, Hara said, the way she knew from the first what we were saying to her. When has there been another baby who knew the water discipline so young? What if a baby's first words to her nurse were, I love you, Hara? Hara stared at Alia. Why do you think I accept her insults? I know there's no malice in them. Alia looked up at her mother. Yes, I have reasoning powers, Reverend Mother, Hara said. I could have been of the Sayadina. I have seen what I have seen. Hara, Jessica shrugged. I don't know what to say, and she felt surprised at herself, because this literally was true. Alia straightened, squared her shoulders. Jessica felt the sense of waiting ended, an emotion compounded of decision and sadness. We made a mistake, Alia said. Now we need Hara. It was the ceremony of the seed, Hara said, when you changed the water of life, Reverend Mother, when Alia was yet unborn within you. Need Hara? Jessica asked herself. Who else can talk among the people and make them begin to understand me? Alia asked. What would you have her do? Jessica asked. She already knows what to do, Alia said. I will tell them the truth, Hara said. Her face seemed suddenly old and sad, with its olive skin drawn into frown wrinkles, a witchery in the sharp features. I will tell them that Alia only pretends to be a little girl, that she has never been a little girl. Alia shook her head. Tears ran down her cheeks, and Jessica felt the wave of sadness from her daughter as though the emotion was her own. I know I'm a freak, Alia whispered. The adult summation coming from the child's mouth was like a bitter confirmation. You're not a freak, Hara snapped. Who dared say you're a freak? Again, Jessica marveled at the fierce note of protectiveness in Hara's voice. Jessica saw then that Alia had judged correctly. They did need Hara. The tribe would understand Hara, both her words and her emotions, for it was obvious she loved Alia as though this was her own child, as though this were her own child. Who said it? Hara repeated. Nobody. Alia used a corner of Jessica's arbor to wipe the tears from her face. She smoothed the robe where she had dampened and crumpled it. Then don't you say it, Hara ordered. Yes, Hara. Now, Hara said, you may tell me what it was like so that I may tell the others. Tell me what it is that happened to you. Alia swallowed, looked up at her mother. Jessica nodded. One day I woke up, Alia said. It was like waking from sleep except that I could not remember going to sleep. I was in a warm, dark place, and I was frightened. Listening to the half-lisping voice of her daughter, Jessica remembered that day in the big cavern. When I was frightened, Alia said, I tried to escape, but there was no way to escape. Then I saw a spark, but it wasn't exactly like seeing it. The spark was just there with me, and I felt the spark's emotions, soothing me, comforting me, telling me that way that everything would be all right. That was my mother. Hara rubbed at her eyes, smiled reassuringly at Alia, yet there was a look of wildness in the eyes of the Fremen woman, an intensity as though they too were trying to hear Alia's words. And Jessica thought, what do we really know of how such a one thinks? Out of her unique experiences and training in ancestry. Just when I felt safe and reassured, Alia said, there was another spark with us, and everything was happening at once. The other spark was the old Reverend Mother. She was trading lives with my mother, everything, and I was there with them, seeing it all, everything, and it was over, and I was them and all the others and myself. Only it took me a long time to find myself again. There were so many others. It was a cruel thing, Jessica said. No being should wake into consciousness thus. The wonder of it is you could accept all that happened to you. I couldn't do anything else, Alia said. I didn't know how to reject or hide my consciousness, or shut it off. Everything just happened. Everything. We didn't know, Hara murmured. When we gave your mother the water to change, we didn't know you existed within her. Don't be sad about it, Hara, Alia said. I shouldn't feel sorry for myself. After all, there's cause for happiness here. I'm a Reverend Mother. The tribe has too, Rev. She broke off, tipping her head to listen. Hara rocked back on her heels against the seating cushion, stared at Alia, bringing her attention down up to Jessica's face. Didn't you suspect? Jessica asked. Shh, Alia said. A distant rhythmic chanting came to them then through the hangings that separated them from the siege corridors. It grew louder, carrying distinct sounds now. Ya, ya, yom, ya, ya, yom, mu zain, wala, ya, ya, yom, mu zain, wala. The chanters passed the outer entrance, and their voices boomed through to the inner apartments. Slowly the sound receded. When the sound had dimmed sufficiently, Jessica began the ritual, the sadness in her voice. It was Ramadan in April on Bela Tigiyus. My family sat in their pool courtyard. Hara said, in air breathed by the moisture that arose from the spray of a fountain. There was a tree of portigals, round and deep in colour, near at hand. There was a basket with mishmash and baklava and mugs of liban, all manner of good things to eat. In our gardens and in our flocks there was peace, peace in all the land. Life was full with happiness until the raiders came, Alia said. Blood ran cold at the screams of friends, Jessica said, and she felt the memories rushing through her out of all those other pasts she shared. La la la, the women cried, said Hara. The raiders came through the mush tamal, rushing at us with their knives dripping red from the lives of our men, Jessica said. Silence came over the three of them, as it was in all the apartments of the siege, the silence while they remembered and kept their grief thus fresh. Presently, Hara uttered the ritual ending to the ceremony, giving the words a harshness that Jessica had never before heard in them. We will never forgive and we will never forget, Hara said. In the thoughtful quiet that followed her words, they heard a muttering of people, the swish of many robes. Jessica sensed someone standing beyond the hangings that shielded her chamber. Reverend Mother, a woman's voice, and Jessica recognized it, the voice of Farfar, one of Stilgar's wives. What is it, Farfar? There is trouble, Reverend Mother. Jessica felt a constriction at her heart, an abrupt fear for Paul. Paul, she gasped. Farfar spread the hangings, stepped into the chamber. Jessica glimpsed a press of people in the outer room before the hangings fell. She looked up at Farfar, a small dark woman in a red-figured robe of black. The total blue of her eyes trained fixedly on Jessica. The nostrils of her tiny nose dilated to reveal the plug scars. What is it? Jessica demanded. There was word from the sand, Farfar said. Yusul meets the Maker for his test. It is today. Young men say he cannot fail. He will be a sand rider by nightfall. The young men are banding for a razzia. They will raid in the north and meet Yusul there. They say they will raise the cry then. They say they will force him to call out Stilgar and assume command of the tribes. Covering water, planting the dunes, changing their world slowly but surely. These are no longer enough, Jessica thought. The little raids, the certain raids, these are no longer enough now that Paul and I have trained them. They feel their power. They want to fight. Farfar shifted from one foot to the other, cleared her throat. We know the need for cautious waiting, Jessica thought, but there's the core of our frustration. We know also the harm that waiting extended too long can do to us. We lose our sense of purpose if the waiting's prolonged. The young men say if Yusul does not call out Stilgar, then he must be afraid, Farfar said. She lowered her gaze. So that's the way of it, Jessica muttered, and she thought, well, I saw it coming, as did Stilgar. Again Farfar cleared her throat. Even my brother, Shoab, says it, she said. They will leave Yusul no choice. Then it has come, Jessica thought, and Paul will have to handle it himself. The Reverend Mother dare not become involved in the succession. Alia freed her hand from her mother's, said, I will go with Farfar and listen to the young men. Perhaps there is a way. Jessica met Farfar's gaze, but spoke to Alia. Go then, and report to me as soon as you can. We do not want this thing to happen, Reverend Mother, Farfar said. We do not want it, Jessica agreed. The tribe needs all its strength. She glanced at Hara. Will you go with them? Hara answered the unspoken part of the question. Farfar will allow no harm to befall Alia. She knows we will soon be wives together, she and I, to share the same man. We have talked, Farfar and I. Hara looked up at Farfar, back to Jessica. We have an understanding. Farfar held out a hand for Alia, said, We must hurry. The young men are leaving. They pressed through the hangings, the child's hand in the small woman's hand, but the child seemed to be leading. If Paul Muad'Dib lays Stilgar, this will not serve the tribe, Hara said. Always before it has been the way of succession, but times have changed. Times have changed for you as well, Jessica said. You cannot think I doubt the outcome of such a battle, Hara said. Usul could not but win. That was my meaning, Jessica said. And you think my personal feelings enter into my judgment, Hara said. She shook her head, her water rings tinkling at her neck. How wrong you are. Perhaps you think, as well, that I regret not being the chosen of Usul, that I am jealous of Chani? You make your own choice as you are able, Jessica said. I pity Chani, Hara said. Jessica stiffened. What do you mean? I know what you think of Chani, Hara said. You think she is not the wife for your son. Jessica settled back, relaxed in her cushions. She shrugged. Perhaps. You could be right, Hara said. If you are, you may find a surprising ally. Chani herself. She wants whatever is best for him. Jessica swallowed past a sudden tightening in her throat. Chani's very dear to me, she said. She could be no. Your rugs are very dirty in here, Hara said. She swept her gaze around the floor, avoiding Jessica's eyes. So many people tramping through here all the time. You really should have them cleaned more often.